they need with regard to sunscreen. So thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity. All America's families basically just have a right to know, are these things safe? Suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from Illinois.
Consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Madam President, it was about 10 days ago the Chicago Tribune had a Sunday exclusive investigative report on fire retardant chemicals. And the report went on for several days, and I called the writers and commended them on the wonderful job that they did on this report. It was as good as any investigation I've ever seen by a committee of Congress. And it raised some serious issues I'd never thought about. We probably have all heard from time to time there are certain chemicals which, when put on fabric, for example, will reduce the likelihood that it will flame and injure someone. Well, I accepted that as truth, and I guess most people would, because there was testimony that was given, even by medical doctors and so-called experts, that said that's a fact. Well, the Tribune series took a look at these so-called experts, and you know what they found? They were on the payroll of the chemical companies that made the fire retardant chemicals. And the doctors were actually kind of manufacturing cases of burns to make the case that states should apply these new standards. Well, over the years, this testimony by these people who had a built-in conflict of interest ended up being persuasive at many levels in many states. And as a result, there were requirements to add fire retardant chemicals to fabrics in clothing, pajamas, furniture, and the like. And then a closer look was taken. The Underwriters Laboratory took a look at these chemicals and said, you know what? They really don't stop a fire from flaming up. The tests that they're using are totally inadequate. These chemicals don't achieve what they're supposed to achieve, but there's another side to the story. The chemicals themselves can be dangerous. These are chemicals that haven't been tested in terms of their exposure to human beings. And the average couch, the Chicago Tribune article said, had 2 pounds of fire retardant chemicals built into it. They put it particularly in those foam cushions. I'm going to get back to that in a second. Remember that, the foam cushions. Well, last November, Madam President, in your wonderful state, my daughter gave birth to twins. November the 15th. It was a source of great celebration, still is. My wife and I were there with our son-in-law and daughter to welcome this little boy and little girl into the world, and after a couple days to bring them home from the hospital to the condo where my son-in-law and daughter live. And we were so careful. I think about it now. Hand sanitizers. We never had that when we were raising our kids, but we were careful to make sure we washed our hands. Every single thing that these kids would come in contact with, the little onesies or the blankets, had to not only be cleaned, but cleaned with the right detergent. We wanted to get the right detergent so it wouldn't cause any problems with these children. Of course, when we're giving them formula, we're sterilizing everything in sight to make sure that it's perfectly clean. And then I recall that moment when I had that tiny little baby and I was going to give this baby a bottle, see if I still remembered how to do it. And they said, well, get a comfortable place. Why don't you go and sit down on the couch? Sit down on the couch. I'd never crossed my mind that as I sat down on the couch and depressed that cushion on the couch, I was releasing a spray of toxic dust from fire retardant chemicals. Never crossed my mind at one moment. And when we went to buy a little kind of cradle with a cushion for each of the kids, we went over to Babies R Us in Columbus Circle, took the subway over there. I never thought to even think about whether or not the cushion on that baby's cradle or crib had fire retardant chemicals in it that might, in fact, be sprayed every time someone sat on it or the baby was put on it. Never crossed my mind. Well, I can tell you as a result of the Chicago Tribune articles, I think about it all the time now. And I think about this. How many American families can make that judgment? when they buy a couch or a chair, when they buy children's furniture. You can't. You cannot physically do it. I'm not a scientist, I'm a political scientist, that doesn't count. I'm not a real scientist. And I can't judge what's safe and what isn't. Whom can I trust? Can I trust the company making the product? Well, you like to think so, but sometimes not. Can you trust the spokespeople for the chemical industry? Unfortunately, they come into this with a conflict of interest. So Senator Frank Lautenberg of New Jersey has created legislation that really calls on the chemical industry to take care with the chemicals that they put into everything we use every single day, to make sure that Americans and families have peace of mind when they buy products, that the Environmental Protection Agency is at least reviewing the chemicals that are being put in those products to decide if they're safe. If the Environmental Protection Agency doesn't do this, who will do it? Can we trust the chemical industry to do it? I don't think so. Can we trust the furniture industry? I'm not sure. But we know if the EPA does it, it could make a difference. 80,000 different chemicals out there now, many of them critically important for our safety and health. Safe chemicals that we can be exposed to every single day without concern. But there are others that aren't. The flame retardant chemicals are a good example of that. And as the presiding officer said when she was speaking on the floor, over the years they have reviewed 200 of these chemicals out of 80,000, 200. And at the end of the day, they banned 5. 5. What about the rest of them? Have they taken a look? Where does the first level of responsibility start? Senator Lautenberg's bill says it starts with those who would put the chemicals in the marketplace, that there be a certain level of safety established before they can be sold across the board. I think that's essential. Madam President, we're on a bill that will not bring up the toxic chemical issue. I hope that'll come up in and of itself soon. But we're on a bill dealing with the Food and Drug Administration, and I heard about your amendment, and I support it. I think it's a good one. Let me tell you something else that we should know. The Food and Drug Administration, a small agency, has a big responsibility. Literally, before any drug can be sold as a prescription drug in America, the Food and Drug Administration has to establish, number one, it is safe, and number two, it's effective. If it says it's going to do certain things, it has to accomplish those things. So there's lengthy testing in terms of these drugs before they're actually licensed, allowed, legal in America. The drugs that make it through all these tests can generate millions, even billions of dollars in profits for the pharmaceutical companies, but many don't make it through the testing process. But the FDA is there to establish that those drugs are safe and effective. And, of course, the consumers rely on it. When the doctor writes a prescription, you feel pretty certain that this is going to be something the doctor knows is good for you, and it's already been tested through the FDA. There's a whole other category of things, though, that we buy every single day that are treated differently. They are called dietary supplements. They include things like vitamins that you take in the morning, minerals. I take a multivitamin every day for I don't know what reason, but I do. And dietary supplements also include things like energy drinks. Heard about any energy drinks lately? You can hardly escape them. The 5-Hour Energy drink, the Monster drink, all these different drinks that you can buy turn out not to be the same as soda or soda pop, but they are dietary supplements in small print on the back of the label. Well, what's the difference? The difference is this. If you wanted to sell a bottle of cola, for example, I won't give any proprietary names here, a bottle of cola, there's a limitation by the FDA about how much caffeine can be put in each bottle of cola. But if you decide, I'm not going to sell cola, which is classified as a beverage or food, I'm going to instead sell Monster Energy drink, and I'm going to call it a dietary supplement, there is no regulation on the amount of caffeine that can be included. Yesterday, I met a woman who came here with her parents and her daughter to be in the gallery as I talked about her late daughter. Her late daughter's name was Anise Fournier from Hagerstown, Maryland, 16 years old. This young girl, with no history or no warning, drank 2 24-ounce Monster Energy drinks in a 24-hour period of time, and it killed her. There was almost 500 milligrams of caffeine in those 2 drinks. It was too much for her. She died of cardiac arrest. Well, those were billed not as beverages and sodas, but as dietary supplement energy drinks. So here's what it comes down to. I have a simple amendment that I'm going to offer. And this amendment will come up, I hope, on the Food and Drug Administration bill. And here's what it says. Every dietary supplement manufacturer who wants to sell their product in America has to register with the FDA. They have to tell the FDA the name of the product, the ingredients in the product, and a copy of the label. That's it. No requirement for testing, just so we know what's out there. And let me add, dietary supplements are coming in from all over the world into the United States. You walk into that vitamin store, nutrition store, you think everything in there has been tested? No. Virtually nothing's been tested. Do you still have a right to buy it? Yes, and I will fight and defend your right to buy it. But I also think we have a responsibility, too. If people get sick and die because of a dietary supplement, we ought to do something about it. I think people across America expect us to. It starts with registration, simple registration, so the Food and Drug Administration knows what's out there. A few years ago, there was a pitcher for the Baltimore Orioles who, in an effort to lose a few pounds before the season, took a dietary supplement that included a compound called ephedra. Ephedra is a stimulant. He died as a result of that compound that he took. We ended up basically banning ephedra from dietary supplements as a result of it. I think it's important for the Food and Drug Administration to have a list of the dietary supplements, the ingredients and what they're selling, and a copy of the label. And some future ephedra, some future compound that we find can be dangerous could then be traced to the actual dietary supplement products to protect American consumers and families. The dietary supplement industry hates my amendment like the devil hates holy water. The notion that they would have to register and disclose the name of their product and its ingredients? No way. You can't do that. It's a violation of basic rights. Baloney. You want to sell in America? Sell safe things. Or at least tell us what you're selling. And if you live in China, for goodness sakes, and want to sell in the United States, is it too much to ask that you register with the FDA and tell us what you're putting on the shelves across America? That's basic. So we'll have a choice. I'm fighting now to put this amendment on there. Let's have a choice on it. Let's have a vote. Should the dietary supplement industry have to register their products? It's pretty basic. This amendment is based on a recommendation from a 2009 GAO report which said the FDA has insufficient information to regulate dietary supplements and analyze adverse event reports. That's what happens when people get sick or die from dietary supplements. Facilities, the amendment requires facilities that manufacture, package, or hold dietary supplements to register the products with the FDA, provide a description of each dietary supplement, a list of ingredients, and a copy of the label. Facilities notify the FDA within 30 days and provide the required registration information with a product is introduced or removed from the market. So they've got 30 days to do it. Any product that's not registered is to be considered misbranded and illegal to sell. In other words, you've got to do it. It's a real law. That's it. That's it. Just register. Tell us what you're selling to Americans. Give us the name, give us the ingredients, give us a copy of the label. Well, get ready, because the industry's coming in here to say this is an outrage. I think it's outrageous that they would not comply with this basic amendment. And I say this to them. I am not opposed to people buying vitamins. I've gone to these nutrition stores, and about every other month they put out, stop the latest Durbin Amendment. Well, I buy vitamins, I take vitamins. It's okay. I think it's fine. You shouldn't have to have a prescription for it. But Americans have a right to know what they're taking. And they have a right to know what, if anything, the government's doing to protect them. I hope my colleagues will support the amendment. I yield the floor.
Senator from Missouri.
Thank you for the time on the floor. You know, I'm supportive of the bill that's come out of the Health Committee to reauthorize user fees for the Food and Drug Administration. We tried these user fees in the past. They would be reauthorized for prescription drugs, for medical devices. This seems to be a way to help get these items to the consumer faster, to get them through the approval process more quickly, to allow the companies that develop new medical devices or new prescription drugs to recoup their investment in a quicker way, which also allows them to get to the generic market in a quicker way. I think it serves the purposes of health care well, and the community that pays the user fees appears to be in support of their continued use, and I am too. This adds generics for faster verification of generics, and it adds a product called biosimilars to the process where fees would be paid, and for all of the same reasons it seems that those fees would also make sense for health care and make sense for health care cost. It allows, again, recouping the investment that's made to develop a new drug quicker. That allows it to go to the generic market quicker. I hope this bill can be approved and be approved even before we leave here for the Memorial Day work period. I think Senator Harkin and Senator Enzi and their committee, the Help Committee, have worked hard. I don't serve on that committee. I'm on the appropriating committee for the Food and Drug Administration for Agriculture, Rural Development, and FDA. I'm glad to be on that committee and have the contacts I have with FDA because of that. But certainly I support this bill. There will be amendments, and we'll look at those amendments as they're offered, though I do think the committee has worked hard in a bipartisan way to bring a bill to the floor that is legislated the way we should legislate. Committees do their work. It's a bipartisan approach. It seeks input, continues current policies, and improves on those policies in a way that I would hope that the Senate and then the House can be supportive of. I know one of the areas where we're likely to have amendments would be the debate that we've had over and over again on whether or not prescription drugs can be imported into the country. And if that amendment's there, I'd have the same position that I've had in the past, that that's fine as long as someone from our government is willing to say that those prescription drugs are what they appear to be. They've been out of the chain of custody, out of the closed pharmaceutical chain supply system that we have believed is always essential to be sure that the drug you're getting is the drug you're getting. The vitamins that Mr. Durbin talked about earlier, my friend from Illinois, the senator from Illinois, I don't know what's in that capsule, and neither does he unless someone's verified that what is purported to be in there is really in there. And it's very easy for that not to be the case, and there are all kinds of examples of that all over the world. And we want to be sure that American consumers that are taking a health product take that product for good cause. The senator from Illinois even mentioned that he thought dietary supplements should be filed with the FDA. Well, certainly if anyone who would think that should think that prescription medicines, pharmaceutical medicines, that someone would need to verify that medicine is the medicine you believe it to be, because you're not taking it for some additional dietary reason. You're taking it because your doctor has told you that's a medicine you need to take. That means there must be some health care reason you're taking it, and you need to be certain, in my view, that that health care reason's being met. Also, Mr. President, I read this week that at a time of trillion-dollar deficits, that the Department of Health and Human Services announced that it was going to go forward with a provision in the Affordable Health Care Act that apparently allows the department to spend $20 million of taxpayer money to launch a PR campaign to convince Americans that they should like the Affordable Health Care Act better than they apparently do. $20 million at a time when we have these trillion-dollar deficits, at a time when, in fact, the health care law has even been challenged in court, and we'll find out within the next month what the court thinks about the potential constitutionality of the health care law. Now, this is I will say, the same Department of Health and Human Services that during the health care debate told insurance companies that they could not tell their customers, they could not communicate with their customers in any way that suggested any possible negative impact that this law might create. I thought that was an incredible position for the government to take at the time. So maybe I shouldn't be surprised that now the government would spend $20 million on a health care, on a PR contract to convince people that they should like this health care plan better than they do. In fact, poll after poll shows that the more people know about the health care proposal, the less they like it. 2 years after its passage, opposition to the health care law, I believe, is stronger than it's ever been. A recent Rasmussen poll said that 56% of voters favor a repeal of the Affordable Health Care Act, believing that it is perhaps neither all that affordable or all that good for health care. And according to USA Today Gallup poll, 72% of Americans think that this bill will make things worse or won't help their family health care situation. It either won't make things better or even believe it will make things worse. It's clear, in my view, that this is a bad law that we can't afford. Bad for families, it's bad for seniors, it's bad for job creators, and I guess maybe that's why we're going to spend $20 million to convince me and others that it's not nearly as bad as we think it is. It's not the first time that the administration has used taxpayer money to roll out publicity initiatives or to move forward in a way that will try to encourage the use of this law. Last year, the Health and Human Services Department asked Congress to quadruple the budget for its public affairs office to another $20 million. So the request was, let's have $20 million in public affairs to double the staff, quadruple the budget. Let's have another $20 million to hire a PR firm to convince the American people that the Affordable Health Care Act is going to be good for them. Let's sway seniors by using $3 million for an ad campaign featuring Andy Griffith, who's one of my favorite actors of all time, who took on the role that would convince people that the health care law was good for seniors. The nonpartisan factcheck.org concluded that ad used, they said, quote, weasel words, unquote, to mislead seniors. I certainly would not imagine that Andy Griffith would use weasel words, but I do know they used $3 million of taxpayer paid-for words to talk about why this plan was going to be good for them. And then the administration recently decided to spend $8.35 billion. Now, Mr. President, we're talking about real money. We're not talking about $20 million or $3 million. We're talking about $8.35 billion to postpone the vast majority of the Medicare Advantage cuts until after the end of this year. Coincidentally, after Election Day as well. This is supposedly out of money that would usually go for a demonstration project. Now, as I understand demonstration projects, this is to take an idea and prove whether it will work or not. Well, apparently this demonstration project is merely to not allow these provisions of the Affordable Health Care Act to go into effect until after the election. I think we can all see what that demonstrates. That demonstrates that there must be something that the administration believes that the American people and seniors would not like if they found out before the election that $8.35 billion was scheduled to be taken out of Medicare and put into another health care program. In fact, the Affordable Health Care Act will spend $500 billion that will come out of Medicare at the time when Medicare, we all know, is about to be in real trouble. If you made this argument anywhere but Washington, D.C., I think you'd be laughed out of the room, that we've got this one fund that's about to be in big trouble, so we're going to take money from it, and we're going to start another program that we also don't quite know how we're going to fund. The Government Accounting Office has said that demonstration project, I think they've identified it as a sham, as a demonstration project, because it doesn't demonstrate anything. This isn't a health care system proving that if you take care of seniors on a per capita basis, that you do a better job keeping them well than if you wait till everybody gets sick for them to be able to see a doctor under Medicare. This just simply demonstrates that the administration would not like people to know what the impact of the law is going to be during this even-numbered year. Government spending out of control, federal debt at a record high. It's unacceptable to me that the administration's decided to waste money on a PR campaign or to waste money to see that the impact of the law is not evident until after Election Day. Instead of spending time and tax-paying dollars to try to convince people that unpopular things should be liked, I'd like to see the President work with the Congress to help us get the 23 million men and women who are either unemployed or underemployed back to work. If we're going to spend money, let's spend money for purposes like that. And I would yield back and note, Mr. President, the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
objection.
Mr. President, today we will be considering and are considering a vital piece of legislation that not only includes all 4 user fee agreements, but also includes policy proposals to improve Food and Drug Administration review and approval of medical products, particularly in the pharmaceutical supply chain. In 2008, when Senator Kennedy was still in the Senate, he and I introduced the Drug and Device Accountability Act. This legislation was largely in response to the extensive oversight I conducted on the Food and Drug Administration. During these investigations, I identified serious problems at the FDA that included severe weaknesses in the inspection process, delays of informing the public of emergency safety problems, and lack of enforcement authority. Based on these findings, the Kennedy-Grassley legislation included provisions to ensure the safety of drugs, including foreign manufactured drugs. It would have expanded FDA's authority to inspect foreign manufacturers and importers on a risk-based schedule. It would have required all manufacturers to register with the agency so they can properly identify the number of manufacturers and where they're located. This would have also ensured that when a crisis occurred, we can quickly locate the questionable facilities, and it would have increased civil and criminal penalties with respect to the violations. Unfortunately, Senator Kennedy and I never had an opportunity to debate this legislation, let alone cast a vote on it. However, roughly a year ago, Senator Harkin and Enzies forged a bipartisan working group to address these challenges. The group has worked tirelessly to produce a bipartisan bill that modernizes FDA's authority to ensure that drug products coming into the United States are safe for American patients. This bill incorporates many provisions introduced in the Drug and Device Accountability Act Senator Kennedy and I introduced. It increases penalties for knowingly and intentionally counterfeiting drug products. It requires electronic submission of certain key information by a drug importer as a condition for grant entry. I would like to have seen additional enforcement tools included in the legislation. For example, granting FDA the authority to destroy unsafe products that are refused admission into our country. That would enhance FDA's ability to protect the public from tainted products. Likewise, I think FDA should have been granted subpoena authority and have it on a par with other federal law enforcement authorities, because currently FDA lacks subpoena authority and has to go through the Department of Justice, which is time-consuming and burdensome. Ultimately, this legislation is a needed step in the right direction towards securing our supply chain. This legislation did not address a top priority of mine, and that is ensuring whistleblowers have adequate protections. 4 months ago, my office learned of an abusive treatment by the Food and Drug Administration towards whistleblowers due to their protected communication with Congress, more specifically with the office of this senator. Once the agency learned of the communication, it began actively monitoring and observing employees' personal email accounts for 2 years until the agency was able to have the employee fired. Regrettably, I was not shocked to learn that the FDA was mistreating whistleblowers within its agency, as it has done so on more than one occasion in the past that I've identified. What makes the example different and worse is that the FDA intentionally went after an employee because they knew that that employee had no protection under the Whistleblower Protection Act. The employee in question happened to be a member of the Public Health Service. And the title is the Public Health Service Commission Corps. And because of a decision from the Court of Federal Claims, those employees in the Public Health Service, along with other members of uniformed service, are not covered by the federal employee whistleblower protections. In 2009, the Court of Federal Claims held in Verbeck versus U.S. that an officer in the Public Health Service Commission Corps is a member of the Uniformed Services and as such is not covered under the Civilian Whistleblower Protection Act, nor the Military Whistleblower Protection Act. This same logic extends to the Commission Corps of the of NOAA. So under this precedent, officers of the Public Health Service and NOAA currently have no whistleblower protection under federal law. This is particularly problematic when you consider that the Public Health Service and NOAA officers can be detailed to agencies like the Food and Drug Administration or the Center for Disease Control, and that's the case here, where that Public Health Service officer was working with FDA. There, they happen to work side by side with civilian employees, doing critical work to review and approve drugs, oversee medical devices, and even work on infectious diseases. However, unlike their civilian colleagues sitting right beside them, if these employees uncover wrongdoing, waste, fraud, and abuse, they can be retaliated against by the agency and have no recourse for it. This is wrong and needs to be fixed without whistleblowers point out waste, fraud, and abuse when no one else will. And they do so while risking their professional careers. Whistleblowers have played a critical role in exposing government failures, and retaliation against whistleblowers should never be tolerated, whether you're public health service or otherwise. For this reason, I offer an amendment that expands whistleblower protection for uniformed employees of the Public Health Service. It corrects the anomaly pointed out in the Court of Federal Claims and ensures that officers in the Public Health Service have some baseline whistleblower protections. It expressly includes the Commission's core of the Public Health Service within the protections of the Military Whistleblower Protection Act. This is consistent with the structure of the Commission Corps functioning like a military organization and matches the fact that these officers receive military-like benefits and retirement. All federal employees should feel comfortable expressing their opinion, both inside the agency and to those of us in Congress. The inclusion of this language will ensure those opinions receive appropriate protections. I want to take this opportunity to express my appreciation to Senator Harkin and Senator Enzi and for their commitment and effort over the years to reform and improve the Food and Drug Administration. We've got to do what we can to protect whistleblowers. They know where the skeletons are buried. They and enterprising journalists come to us in Congress so we can investigate. We need those sources of information. I yield the floor.
The Majority Leader.
I ask unanimous consent that the execution of the previous order with respect to S3187 be delayed until 2:15 today. At 2:15 p.m., the Majority Leader be recognized prior to execution of the order, and that all provisions of the previous order remain in effect at that time.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, we're close to a way to move forward on the FDA bill. I do say this, however. We have, on this side, we've cleared everything. So the disputes now are with the Republicans on a Republican amendment. We are willing to do whatever's necessary on that amendment. So I hope we can get this worked out. It would sure be to the, as we've heard all the speeches about this important bill, it really is important. As I indicated today, talking about some of the shortages we've had in Nevada where people die as a result of not having the medicine. And we're nearing a time where we can't prolong this anymore. This legislation is necessary because the bill, the information that we have in this bill, everything we need, expires at the end of this month.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I rise today to talk about the importance of passing the Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act, more commonly known as the User Fee Reauthorization Bill. This bipartisan legislation would reauthorize the user fee programs for the medical device industry, incredibly important in our home state of Minnesota, as well as the pharmaceutical industry. This bill represents over a year of negotiations between the FDA, Congress, and the industry. I believe we have achieved a good balance in terms of the improved performance incentives through increased accountability, more meaningful goals, important process improvements, better metrics, and additional resources. Not only does this legislation include the user fee agreements negotiated between the industry and the FDA, it also includes several reforms that will benefit the entire healthcare system and improve public health. The bill will make medicine safer for children. It will protect the global drug supply chain. It will improve access to safe, innovative medical devices and treatments, and it will tackle the drug shortage crisis that is spreading across the country. On Monday, I talked about the work that I did leading the effort on drug shortage, and I'm so pleased that Senator Harkin and Senator Enzi included this provision in this bill. But I also today believe it's important to talk about the guts of the bill, and that is the improvements with the FDA and the work that needs to be done. I want to commend the Help Committee on which you serve, Mr. President, and specifically Chairman Harkin and Ranking Member Enzi for being dedicated to ensuring that this process was open, transparent, and bipartisan. At a time when Congress has been deeply divided, this legislation shows that we can still overcome our differences and address the needs of the country through strong bipartisan cooperation. For our state of Minnesota, passing this bill is vital to our continued economic growth and strength. With strong institutions like the Mayo Clinic and the University of Minnesota, and innovative companies like 3M and Boston Scientific and Medtronic and St. Jude, Minnesota's job numbers have fared better than the national average, with our unemployment rate now more than 2.5 points below the national average. That is 5.6% compared to 8.1%. That is also attributed to the fact that Minnesota has one of the largest and most dynamic pockets of medical device companies in the country. I mentioned a few of the big ones, but there are also many small, thriving companies, and many of our biggest innovations have come from the small companies, adding up to about 400 firms employing over 35,000 people across our state. And we can't forget that it was Minnesota that brought the world one of the biggest innovations in the country. I'm not talking about the Post-it note, Mr. President, although that is true. That did come from our state. I'm talking about the pacemaker, which we give thanks to a company called Medtronic that started out in a garage in Minneapolis. So our roots really do run deep in this industry. But medical technology is not just important to Minnesota. It is important to our country, putting billions of dollars into our economy each year. And it's important to the world. The devices we make here in the United States don't just save lives locally, they save lives globally. And as you look at potential exports and how we're going to reach the President's goal of doubling our exports in 5 years and how we're going to get out of the economic rut that we've been in, a lot has to do with exports, new markets, a rising middle class in countries like China and India where people are finally going to the hospital, will use our medical devices, will bring jobs to the United States. But that only works if these medical devices get approved and if we're able to make them, have the skilled workers to make them, and can beat out our competition, basically, of companies in other countries that may be growing unless we make sure that we have a proper approval process here that keeps things safe but also moves smoothly and quickly. The kind of meaningful, innovative work that our country needs more of is really this kind of work. It is high-tech manufacturing, and that's what we need more of in this country. As co-chair of the bipartisan MedTech caucus in the Senate, I've had several conversations with the FDA about ways to improve this regulatory environment. I've introduced bills, as you have as well, Mr. President, and looked at the importance of putting in things that guarantee safety, but also make sure that we improve the process so we get more innovation and more jobs in this country. If we're not careful, Mr. President, as we know, countries like Europe, if they move faster than us, as they have in some instances, then we have a problem, because then the venture capital money goes to Europe. With China requiring country of origin approvals, you can have a situation where companies decide that they can get things done quicker if they move their business to a place like Europe and then get the approvals in place so they can sell in China. We don't want that to happen. The FDA will now be responsible for total review time goals. That is an important part of this. This measures the time from submission of a new application to the time the technology is available to patients. Putting the FDA on the hook for this measure will streamline the approval process and help get innovative and life-saving devices and treatments to patients. In addition to improved review times and performance standards, the one thing I hear about the most from our medical device companies, both small and large, is that they need better communication between the FDA and industry. This agreement takes significant steps to address this issue by opening clear lines of discussion before a submission is made. This helps provide companies with clear direction and requires the FDA to stick to their commitments. It also requires interaction between the FDA and the applicant during the review process to keep everyone on the same page, avoid miscommunication and costly delays. And the agreement also requires the FDA to work with companies to find the best path forward if goals are not met. And most importantly, this legislation will give the FDA the tools necessary to meet these goals. This agreement provides for $595 million in user fees over the next 5 years. This is meant to provide for additional reviewers, enhanced training, and increased efficiencies to help improve FDA performance and help patients get access to the most innovative and safest products available. But a positive user fee agreement does not guarantee success. We must also focus on the execution and administration of these new resources and new guidelines. That is why I introduced a bipartisan bill with Republican Richard Burr of North Carolina and Democrat Michael Bennet of Colorado that would significantly improve the regulatory process. It would tackle 3 important things related to the approval process. First, it would increase efficiency by strengthening the agency's least burdensome principles, which have been continuously overlooked by FDA's reviewers. The average time to approve a 510K application has increased 43% from 2003 to 2007 time period to 2010. This is simply unacceptable. Second, it would improve conflict of interest provisions, making it easier for the FDA to recruit top-line experts to take part in the review process. This would allow the FDA to protect the integrity of the review from undue conflicts of interest, but also take advantage of available expertise. Third, it would require the FDA to use an independent consulting organization to assess the management processes at the Center on Devices. This would encourage the agency to consider the impact of its decisions on innovation while also considering the balance between the risk and the benefits of the new devices. I'm thankful that in working with Senator Harkin and Senator Enzi, we were able to include these improvements in this legislation. Equally as important as improving the regulatory process at the FDA, the legislation also includes my provision on drug shortages. I've come to the floor several times in the past year to talk about the crisis that has impacted individuals all across our country. The story of little Axel Zerbes, a little 4-year-old boy who was going to get treatment for leukemia. His parents put in a panic, little bald boy, little smile on his face, and what is found out? The drug that he needed, cytarabine, was missing in action, not in the hospital, not in the pharmacy. They actually were looking into booking flights to Canada so he could get the treatment that he needed. At the last minute, someone located that drug. But sadly, that does not happen in many, many cases across the country where we've had people come forward and talk about missing breast cancer treatments, people who actually have died across the country because drugs were not available. The fact that physicians and nurses and pharmacists are spending hours and hours and hours of their time, which should be spent with patients looking for pharmaceuticals, is an actual outrage. We know there are many reasons for this. We are glad that the industry was willing to work with us to come up with at least a short-term patch here where the FDA will be alerted as a result of the provisions in this bill when the pharmaceutical companies believe that there's going to be a shortage. Right now they're only required to do it for orphan drugs. Now they're going to be required to do it for all drugs. And these can be shortages as a result of raw materials that aren't there, shortages as a result of mergers in the pharmaceutical industry, shortages as a result of decisions not to produce a drug because it may not be as profitable, shortages because of all kinds of things that could happen in the course of commerce. The key point is here, when the FDA finds about things early, they have been able to avert drug crisis. They find another manufacturer in our country, or they find one abroad that's safe, and they get the drugs in. They've done it over 200 times in 2 years, and this will simply give them more tools to be able to avert what is an escalating crisis in this country, where we're seeing more and more shortages of drugs on a weekly basis. I'm so glad, as I said, that this bipartisan provision, Senator Casey originally introduced it with me. It has support from Senator Susan Collins and many others, and that our working group was able to work out an agreement to get this provision in the Senate bill with very good prospects in the House under the leadership of bipartisan bill led by Congresswoman DeGette of Colorado. So I want to thank my colleagues for their work for 2 reasons. One, this is important for medical device and pharmaceuticals in terms of getting fast approval. That's better for patients. That's better for jobs in America as we become a country, again, that makes stuff, that invents things, that exports to the world. To do that, you need to get the regulatory process working. Secondly, this bill is good because it contains this drug shortage provision to finally get at something that is long overdue, and that is the escalating crisis of drugs that are gone missing that should be in the hands of patients across this country. And now we put them in a much better position in terms of being able to find alternative drugs in either our own country or others, so we don't have these shortages as we're seeing every single day. That is why I think it's very important that we get this bill done and that we get it done soon. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President.
The Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, are we presently in a quorum call?
Yes, we are.
May I ask that the quorum call be